Within the realm of political science and international relations, two behemoths duke it out in Mortal Kombat. A fight so supremely epic, even Skyrim dragons tuck their tail between their legs and fly off. On one side, you have political realists. They're your grumpy, distrustful neighbors who always brush dead leaves on your parchment, but get angry when you brush dead leaves on their parchment. On the other side, you have political liberalists. They're your church-going delusional friend whose house got robbed and one day decided to forgive the robbers as an act of charity and goodwill. But, despite the differences, both possess the same thing in common. They are both as stubborn as a Minecraft bedrock. Welcome back to the Based Indonesian Show, where I help you polisci students wrap your head around a concept your professor spent 2 hours explaining in just a few minutes. Realism versus liberalism has always been the great debate of the international relations field. Probably one of the greatest debates in history, right behind the great debate of Goku versus whoever comes up in the anime-verse. Some people think that Goku versus Saitama is a matter of debate. To understand why these two concepts clash over the unquestioned supremacy of international relations, we must first understand the basis of international relations. International relations are conducted based on the social order of the world. And the social order of the world is determined by the nature of which the world is brought upon. Creatures prey on each other seeking to monopolize resources to secure their existence, therefore creating a social order of uncertainty and doubt. This insecurity fuels human assumption regarding the way things work. One of the most remarkable things about us is our ability to spot patterns. We've acquired this ability in order to survive hazards, the weather, predators, and the limitations of our own body by hunger and thirst. However, our ability to detect patterns lead us to be able to have an unclear prediction of what will happen in the future, often without underlying evidence. This is called assumption. And because there are no indication of the exact nature of the world, whether it's nurturing or merciless, humans assume the nature of the world by themselves. When we do not find a definite answer, either because we are simply too stupid or because the answer is impossible to find, we tend to come up with our own answers to dispel the ambiguity of the natural law. Existentialism! Realism and liberalism is the result of such assumptions about the nature of the world. Both theories function as an answer to understanding how the world works. Thucydides during the Peloponnesian War once said that everything Athens does is for its own benefit and profit, even if it tries to be the good guy. This assumption led to the beginning of realism as a school of thought. Realism is actually composed of different types and forms of thinking unified by the idea that world politics are always a field of conflict fought over wealth, status, and power. They always believe that humans are always inherently selfish, driven to acquire supremacy over the rest, and to subjugate their peers. Harsher way of putting it, mankind is barbaric. Raoul Krauset from Gundam Seed said it best. Mankind's destiny is to be the strongest, to reach the farthest, and climb the highest. Sounds oddly social Darwinistic, but that's a different topic. This is because the conditions of this world promotes ruthless behavior. There are plenty of different people, limited amounts of resources, and ultimately, no greater order to actually restrain people. In essence, this is a state of anarchy. Take it like this. When a neighborhood has little food source on the street, the stray cats are likely to be more violent and feral so they can secure more food for themselves and avoid risking starvation. This is because the cats know there are a limited amount of food and must do everything they can through violence and coercion in order to attain power and hopefully to secure food and ensure their survivability. Using this sense, states are like stray cats, who wages conflict with other states through different levels of governance, with the sole purpose of collecting more power for themselves and securing their existence. Realism is split into several branches. Classical realism, where human nature drives conflicts. Neorealism or structural realism, where it is not human nature but rather the state and the international system that drives conflicts. Liberal realism, or the English school, a group of states with the same norms clashes with different groups of states with different norms. Lastly is neoclassical realism, of Frankenstein's monster between classical realism and neo-realism, where states justify their actions due to external factors rather than just prejudice. Despite differences, all of these branches ultimately agree on 4 points. The needs of the state are above your own needs, making the state very important. That means if the state wants to draft you into the military force, then you'll be damned. The world is in perpetual chaos because no one is able to tell states what to do. Everyone and everything is selfish and egotistical, only out to serve and pleasure themselves. Everyone and everything wants to be strong and influential to protect themselves. So you can imagine these realists being this uber backstabber or dark vigilante or uni students that wants to sound cool but end up being total edgelords. Realism and realists do view this world as it should be, but rather how it is. They only see if things benefit them or keep them safe rather than if it's good or bad. Realists value materials like food, money, energy, power, and weapons, not really caring about morals at all. Being a good guy is less of a problem for them when they value power. In hindsight, realists are people like Batman, Rick Sanchez, Thanos, Lelouch, and Tyrion Lannister. People who always try to justify their often and not rough means for the ends. Using the cat analogy I've mentioned in passing above, in other hand, when a neighborhood has an abundance of food resources, with folks feeding the cats, making sure everyone has food, the cats tend to be more peaceful and less territorial. They are less likely to get into a fight or struggle for food. The cats become more open, cooperative, and docile. Back in the Enlightenment, Voltaire, Rousseau, and other philosophers emerged with thoughts that challenged the notion of hereditary governance, unfurling in Europe that was predominantly a monarchy. The 30 Years' War, increasing corruption of the nobility, more peasants becoming smarter than their smelly liege lords, has contributed to the idea of liberalism. Liberalism stresses out that mankind has the option not to become barbaric, that by nurturing a peaceful, cooperative, and compassionate society, we would be able to create a worldly condition where we do not have to struggle or put ourselves into conflict over food. The end of the 30 Years' War has proved to the philosophers back then that people have the option to be civilized, not barbaric. Shu Oma from Guilty Crown said it best: "We must separate the good from the trash." Mankind has the wisdom and knowledge to determine what is right and what is wrong. Both experience and logic can show a better solution outside of the conflict, where ideally everyone gets a piece of the cake. Liberalism believes that security can be conditioned through mutual benefit and cooperation, and to this end, liberalist ideas tend to manifest into intergovernmental institutions to regulate world order. Liberalism has evolved into neoliberalism later on. Parallel to neorealism, neoliberalism postulates that states can condition a secure world through intergovernmental organizations, democracy, and economic cooperation, creating interdependence. If a country shares democratic norms with others, as well as binding capitalist ties, often it deters acts of warfare between the two countries. Liberalists abhor acts of warfare, and liberal countries tend to only go to war with other countries that do not share its norms. Think liberalist as your idealistic to the point of being a delusional friend who believes the world will be a better place if we all join hands and sing Kumbaya. It's a common misconception that liberalism does not pursue power. Liberalism pursues powers too, but differs from realists on the method. Liberalists acquire power through cooperation, diplomacy, commerce, and soft power. As such, liberalism can come off as an overly moralistic than realist, while pursuing the same material interest. The debate between realism and liberalism have always dominated the discussion of theoretical international relations, while there are other debates inside the field of international relations involving positivism, post-positivism, constructivism, and even Marxism. Everything pales in comparison to the realism and liberalism debate. The first instance of the debate was in early 1930s, where scholars disputed over how to deal with Nazi Germany. Realist scholars believe that Nazi Germany's emergence encourages other nations to strengthen their military alliances and hard power in order to deter a possible German invasion and secure a nation's sovereignty. Liberal scholars believe that Nazi Germany's action could be constricted or even contained and aborted through instruments such as the League of Nations, where to stop a German expansion, nations must come together in dialogue. Both thoughts provided ample solutions to stop the Nazi threat, but we all know how that ended. Post-war, the debate continued on to analyze and contextualize the relations between countries in the Cold War. Looking at its history, we can understand that realism and liberalism has two fundamental assumptions. In theory, realism assumes that humans are bad and unruly, while liberalism assumes that humans are bad and unruly but can do good if they choose so. These notions are mutually exclusive with each other. Why? Because one believes that human nature cannot change, while the other appeals that while human nature is unchanging, humans can also nurture betterment. Realism are skeptical over liberal ideas that human nature can probably change its nature, making the world less chaotic, while liberalism sees realism as stagnant, reactionary, wanting to inflict conflict when there should be no conflict at all. The debate also affects the realm of policymaking. Realism, being state-centric, wants to be independent and strong. Realism sees that liberal policies will depower the state and make it even more dependent on other states, giving other states more leverage over their own states. Realism will also conduct diplomacy and attempt to create friendships, but will do so on the basis of interest above all else. The primary driving force behind realist diplomacy is geopolitics, and while it does not actually have friends, it has interests that will continue to give them friends as long as the interest remains the same. As such, they view liberalist diplomacy as irrational and compromising, viewing their own quote-unquote allies with suspicion at best. Liberalism values international cooperation, wanting to be strong through joint effort. Liberalism sees realist policies as pointlessly hostile, dangerous, and stationary. Liberalism believes that adopting realist tendencies will resort to no friends in a community of other states. Liberals must conduct diplomacy and will often forge a strong alliance, especially with other countries that share its norms and moralistic views. Most friendships are established mostly out of commerce and norms. As such, liberals tend to find themselves allied strongly with other countries, using this alliance as a deterrence. The primary driving force of liberal diplomacy is idealism, and to this end, liberals will often manifest their friendships with other countries in the form of intergovernmental organization and institutions. These groups most often have the express purpose of sharing power and maintaining commitment of countries that are part of it. In hindsight, realists are a bunch of doomers and survival freaks that are always much prepared for the end of the world, while liberalists are delusional entrepreneurs that envisions a utopian society as possible, but not. However, while these two thoughts have strong opposing fundamental views on how to define behavior, recent theories and arguments have often blurred the line between the two. And some scholars actually believe that the entire debate between realism and liberalism is a myth. The international relations academia are always strongly liberal and internationalist, meaning they would always advocate for cooperation, dialogue, and communion between the states. I mean, let's face it, there won't be any international relations if there's no diplomacy. Meanwhile, realism is seen less as a thought but more as the default state of things. In the end, it is always important to understand that realism and liberalism are just two ways of looking at the same thing differently. One must always be open to different perspective and must take account consideration from both sides when formulating an opinion to prevent prejudice and tunnel vision over confidence. Both of these thoughts provide a crucial lesson in understanding mankind's behavior. Realism asserts that humans, and to an extent states, are borderline unruly as long as no order exists to control it, while liberalism imposes that order can be created if humans choose to rein themselves in. I, however, see it in a more ironic light. Realism is supposed to be more rigid and regimented, inflexible, but it turned out to be more freer as it protects the notions that humans and states are unruly. While liberalism promotes freedom, it turned out to be more strict in that it wishes to impose institutions and constitutions on the world order. If you want to see more explanation about political theory, don't forget to click like and subscribe, and we'll bring you the freshest videos to your algorithm. Thank you for watching this episode of the Based Indonesian Show, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye-bye, real people!